We're in the information age, but facts are in short supply. Reject the noise, ask bold questions, and seek the truth with FBI whistleblower and common sense extremist Steve Friend. This is the American Radicals Podcast.
It is the American Radicals Podcast, Wednesday, August 26th, 2026. And today we're going to talk about some more judicial sabotage related to immigration matters, some more sob stories about illegal aliens, not including Abuela missing her leg because of the diabetes, but this one is going to touch on some service members who you already feel bad for. ICE arrested a, quote, jaw-dropping number of illegal aliens in the general Washington, D.C. area. The Department of Justice has a jury problem in the exact same venue, Washington, D.C. Janine Pirro struggling mightily there. Subtle fakes. We will discuss the term. It's a new one coming out of 404 Media. Data centers might be having an oblique moment, according to Politico. And a question, why are men leaving the workforce? So let's get after it. I'm pretty fired up today, guys. We got a lot to cover. It's going to scratch all the itches, the things I like to talk about, but mostly because Madam Friend and I are continuing to do the us time, working out together. We go to the YMCA, and I just saw every flippin' person that makes me angry today. That includes the elderly woman who insists on bringing her poodle with the really strange haircut in there, like it's going to be competing at some sort of a dog show because it's a desperate cry for attention, on top of the other women who are in a desperate cry for attention, completely dressed inappropriately. They're dressed like they're 18 when they're really 48. And then there's also the guys that it's a day ending in Y, so it has to be chest day, and they have to be doing things that are in my way. So fired up about that. And then we immediately leave there. And because my younger guy is coming up on a birthday, we're planning out a little bit of a celebration. Now, he doesn't watch the AMRAD pod, so I guess I can share the details with you. We're going to surprise him at school. We're going to bring him some cupcakes so his classmates can celebrate with him, because it kind of stinks to have your birthday on a school day, and that's a bummer. So we're going to think outside the box and essentially make his lunchtime a birthday party for him. It works, right? Except my little guy got a recent diagnosis. He is allergic to dairy and gluten. It's like the worst nightmare possible for planning out a cupcake party. So we find this cupcake place. We drive there. We go in. They got a huge selection. They say, hey, we got non-gluten. We got non-dairy. Would you like vegan? All of that sort of stuff. We wind up picking what we like. We said, hey, we'll get 2 dozen of the cupcakes, squared away, schedule it. And they said, hey, just so you know, it's a little bit of an add-on because of the gluten stuff and the dairy stuff. All right, no problem. $50 for 24 cupcakes. Little steep. And as we're driving away, we get a phone call from the cupcake place. And they say, oh, we're sorry. We only billed you for 12 cupcakes. We're going to need to double that. I'm dropping a C note for 2 dozen cupcakes. So I'm fired up, guys. And I want to stay really at this energy level and talk to one of the things that I believe is one of the most important subjects that is just being brushed over by so many people that are in the influencer space or the content creation space. And it's something that I will never let go. And that is the mandate that was the 2024 election, in which the American people, via the popular vote and the Electoral College, elected Donald J. Trump to become the president yet again, because we wanted mass deportations. We wanted significant changes to the way that our immigration system worked in this country. So the first several stories I want to touch on involve that. And we can begin with the Washington Post, which is all too happy to report that a federal judge, I guess the most important person in our government right now, has now struck down a visa ban from 75 countries that came from the White House. The Trump administration must resume processing visas for people from 75 countries that the government deemed likely to become a, quote, public charge. That means that the executive branch, the Article 2 branch, which kind of has enforcement responsibilities as it relates to making sure that we have sovereignty at our national border and allowing people from other countries to come here to have a vacation or to work or to go to school, whatever the reason. It's kind of housed under the Article 2 branch. But because the Article 3 branch is populated by a whole bunch of communist leftists, they think that they have a say in this entire thing. And when the Trump administration looked out and said, hey, there's 75 countries where people are asking to come here, and it is in our opinion, after having done some modicum of an analysis, that a lot of these people are coming from third world hellholes and will immediately get on the government dole. It will require the American people to have more of their money stolen, I mean taxed, or we'll have to print more money, which will make the American people's money worth less via inflation, so we can sustain people that aren't from here to begin with. So wouldn't it be easier to just not allow them in the country? That seems like an objectively fair and reasonable thing that you would want to have happen in a country that was interested in its border sovereignty, but you don't live in a normal country anymore. State Department officials cited data that more than 30% of the households with immigrants from those countries receive some form of public assistance. So you're telling me that the people that were already here, which this ban would not have affected at all, 3 in 10 of them were already on the government teach? How was that allowed? So let's not let the Trump administration off the hook. You have people that are in this country that are not from here, that have a visa and immediately got on the government teat, and we allow them to not only remain here, but stay on the government teat. And you're using that as the background information to have an assessment to say, we probably shouldn't let more of those people in here. Good, not great, certainly not perfect. But this judge has now said that the ban, the temporary halt from these 75 countries must be lifted. Experts said that the indefinite pause would turn away nearly half of all legal immigrants over a 1-year period. U.S. District Judge Jeanette Vargas, a Biden appointee, ruled that the policy, quote, represents a direct abrogation of consular officers' exclusive, congressionally granted authority to determine if someone is eligible for a visa. Okay, Your Honor, let's just take you for what your words are in this one. A federal judge, a Biden appointee, probably not Joe Biden's idea, somebody who was in the vicinity of the marionette puppet that was Joe Biden with their hand directly up his rectum, operating him to say what they wanted him to say, appointed this woman. Her name is Jeanette Vargas. The quote again, this ban on allowing people from these countries, which the Trump administration said they're going to get on the government teat and require us to sustain them. This ban would represent an abrogation of consular officers' exclusive, congressionally granted authority to determine if someone is eligible for a visa. What's a consular officer? Well, I actually looked it up. I mean, I'm not that hip to what goes on at the State Department because this does come out of the Department of State, which at last check operates within the executive branch, not the Article 1 branch, as this judge said that this was a congressionally bequeathed ability for the consular officer. I looked it up. Let's nerd out and say what a consular officer actually is. It's from the United States Code, 22 USC section 2715B. For purposes of this section, the term consular officer includes any U.S. citizen employee of the Department of State who is designated by the Secretary of State. That's not Congress. Secretary of State, that's an executive role, to perform consular services pursuant to such regulations as the Secretary may prescribe. So it would seem, Your Honor, that the consular officer exclusive authorities are not necessarily congressionally granted. They seem to be granted by the Secretary of State, which means that you are doing judicial sabotage. You're subverting not only the will of the American people who elected Donald Trump, but what is within the purview of the presidency, and that is to appoint a Secretary of State who goes and operates the State Department and gives explicit instructions to the people who work for the State Department to ban a bunch of ne'er-do-wells from 75 countries who are going to immediately steal from the American people. Now, let's stay on some immigration things, but this is going to be more in the line of illegal aliens. So I've got a few of them here, and I want to go to the hard left and look at what NPR is reporting about immigration. The headline here, the system meant to protect ICE detainees has collapsed. This is all about the detention of these illegal aliens at the hands of immigrations and customs enforcement. There's a grievance system in the immigration detention. It's designed to offer a safe channel to report violations of standards and seek redress without fear of retaliation. So you're talking about if somebody is locked up in the pokey because they're an illegal alien and they're mistreated and something is unsanitary or unsafe, or they get sexually assaulted and raped, or if they need to have medication and they're not getting it, there's a system for them to functionally whistleblow, to complain, to put a complaint in the comment box and say, we need something better. Now, I understand that America is supposed to set a higher standard. We're not supposed to be putting people into a gulag, into like a pit where they're just in squalor while they wait for us to eject them from the country. Now, I think a lot of the complaints there are probably roped into people who are very unhappy about having been detained by ICE. So a lot of frivolous complaints. On top of that, what if we just moved so fast that there weren't any possibility of having unsanitary conditions because nobody was waiting there for weeks or months or years on end? I think any legitimate gripes that you might have might be downstream of us not doing the mass deportations fast enough. But NPR isn't really worried about that. NPR, after all, does not want to have mass deportations. They want ollie ollie oxen free. They want mass amnesty for tens of millions of illegal aliens who have flooded across our border and continue to flood across our border, despite what the Trump administration claims. There's been some recent revelations that the zero entries into the southern border, that's completely farcical. The system didn't work for this individual who isn't named. They protect his anonymity. They call him DE, Delta Echo. He has had a brain tumor growing in his head for the last 12 years. He was supposed to start chemotherapy the week he was picked up by ICE. All right, I'm sorry, not sorry. That's a bunch of crap. He was picked up a couple of blocks from his home, just about to start the chemotherapy for the tumor in his brain that he'd had for over a dozen years, NPR. Oh my god, I needed that. I feel far less fired up over the woman with the poodle at the gym now. You should know that DE, he was an illegal alien in our country for 26 years. And at no point in there did he actually seek medical attention to address the growth that was in his brain. He claims that he has seizures because he wasn't getting his medication on time. So he wanted to lodge a complaint. Now, neither ICE nor any of the private prison companies contracted by the Department of Homeland Security are required to disclose how many grievances are filed at any given detention center each year. I don't have a problem with that. I don't care. The people who are detained in a detention center that is run by ICE or is outsourced to some private institution using funds from ICE via the Department of Homeland Security, they're illegal aliens. I don't really care. If they don't like the conditions, they should have just left the country when a majority of the voters sent Donald Trump to the White House on the condition that he was going to carry out mass deportations. You knew it ahead of time and you didn't think that it was going to happen. I don't feel sorry for you if it's a little bit chilly. I don't feel bad if your medication is a couple of hours late. Sucks to be you. You should have left. You should never have come here to begin with. Now, some suggest there is a deliberate ploy to keep the public in the dark. By that, they just mean the public who's interested in amnesty, to try to pull on your heartstrings so you feel mega Doppler bad for the illegal aliens and come around to the inevitable conclusion that they should be allowed to remain in this country so they can address the tumor that is growing into their head that they pinky swear, cross their heart, hope to die, stick a needle in our eye to maybe puncture the tumor, that they were about to walk into the oncologist and have addressed if it hadn't been for ICE. Dag nabbit. No, I don't think so. Now, what will get me more fired up, and probably you as well, is the resolution to the DE story, this anonymous guy who claims that he has brain cancer. Um, he he's not in custody anymore. He's didn't get to see an oncologist while he was there, and that was one of his complaints. But he was eventually released from the detention center after filing a petition because everybody felt bad for him. And he filed the petition not with a federal court, where you might have a Biden appointee who is there who's saying, "Oh, you know what? Banning people coming from a third world hellhole because they will inevitably wind up sucking our resources away because they can't afford to sustain themselves in our country. That can't happen." And it's actually it's my job as somebody wearing a black robe to tell the consular officer what it actually is their job. And I'm saying that that should come from Congress, even though in the legal code it does come from the Secretary of State. You know, no, they went to a state court, which means that a California state judge somehow executed some modicum of authority to get an illegal alien out of lockup from a detention center, and he was allowed to go scot-free into the interior of the country. This article came out August 20th of this year with the Trump administration in full effect. So I guess we're still doing catch and release. Now, the sob story with DE aside, let's actually go to the examples that we like to call out here and bring them to your attention because they're garbage. They're designed for one thing and one thing only, to make you feel bad for the illegal alien and say, well, can we make an exception for this guy or this gal because of some circumstance? For 2 years now, I've been saying this, almost 2 years. When Donald Trump got elected in November of 2024, the stories were already written by the communist media in this country. They were going to be about Abuela who lost her leg to diabetes, and her great granddaughter who's working under the table to make sure that she can support her, and we can't separate families. And that dog won't hunt. There is no soft touch. There's no soft approach that will ever suffice to do what was required to do, and that is to deport, eject 30, 40, 50, 100 million illegal people from our country. They don't have a claim here. They're not citizens. They're sucking up the resources. They're taking up space, even if they're not getting the welfare. They're clogging the roads. They're clogging the parking spaces. They're clogging the schools. They're clogging the hospitals. Their poop is clogging our sewage system. We don't have the infrastructure to deal with it. They all have to go. And that's going to require us to be mean, to do things that are kind of against our nature. Nobody really likes to be mean except me, who laughs at potentially cancer patients, but it's funny. March them down to the southern border. Trail of Tears style at the tip of a gun. Make sure they cross that Rio Grande and then position an 18-year-old atop a Humvee with a 50 cal and tell them don't come back. Don't even give them a bottle of water. We do not want to encourage the pigeons to come back, so don't feed the pigeons. Go home. And if it doesn't sound good to you and you don't want to wind up in some sort of detention center that doesn't take your complaints, leave now before we come get you. That is the only way this could possibly happen. And that hasn't happened. But what we are getting, the sob stories that were already written, and they're actually kind of trying to play into the current events so they can double down on the sob stories. So CBS News is the media choice here for this one. Headline: U.S. Navy sailor on the USS Lincoln says his dad was arrested by immigration officials. Dude, you gotta be kidding me. The USS Lincoln, that was the ship from hell where they didn't have shampoo and they didn't have deodorant because I guess our logistical supply chain within the US Navy is so crappy that they couldn't get them toothpaste aboard an aircraft carrier. Come on, this is garbage. But we're going to compound it. We're going to make you feel bad for it's a service member. We gotta support our military like Darlene Nordone wants you to do, right? Support the military, support the troops. And you gotta feel bad for this guy because his dad's an illegal alien. So you feel bad he was on this ship. Now you feel bad for his dad. And then you say, well, can we make an exception, Steve? No, no exceptions. This guy's a citizen who's in the Navy. He can stay. His dad has to go. I don't care about the sob story. U.S. Navy sailor Joshua Aviles said he learned his father was arrested by federal immigration officials while on his 9th month aboard the USS Abraham Lincoln. Oh no. Caddy Delgado, his half-sister, told CBS News that her stepfather was on his way to the mechanic when he was arrested by Border Patrol. Oh, man, I guess he didn't get his oil changed. I guess it's not quite as bad as having to go get the cancer taken out of your head. She said he's been living in the U.S. for a month, 6 months, a year? No, 20 years, 2 decades. This piece of crap has been in our country as an illegal alien. he has some pending immigration application to obtain legal status. And historically, immigration arrests of military spouses and family have not been common, but under the Trump administration they have, because Donald Trump is mean, orange, and literally Hitler. Or the Trump administration is following through on the mandate to a certain extent and saying, well, it's not written down in the law. Not like the law that says what a consular officer's responsibilities are and who they are derived from. It says, well, historically, if your family member is in the military, we don't give you that hard of a time about overstaying your visa. Or if you're here illegally and you're in some sort of a process, you can stay here and remain here. That's not required. That's not written down in the law. That's not in our Constitution of the United States, the social compact. It's memorialized in that document that says that the federal government is supposed to enforce our borders. It's not there. So he can get his butt out of our country and apply for some sort of status. And with full knowledge that he's been here for 20 years as an illegal alien, I think that would bode really, really poorly for him. So he decided to risk it and decided to say, well, my son is in the military. You can't do this to me. Don't feel bad for you at all, sir. You got to go. And as far as the countering the narrative, because that's doubling up on the sob stories. You've got the USS Lincoln military member and a father. Oh my gosh, we feel so bad for him. We got to counter. We got to follow suit. So let's get our contrary story. This one comes from the Daily Signal. These aren't hard to find. I just type in illegal alien murder on Google and immediately get a news story from the Daily Signal. Headline: illegal immigrant charged with brutal Fairfax County murder. Now, Daily Signal needs to do better. It's illegal alien, but I guess I will take it for what it's worth. At least they said illegal. Alexis Antonio Cedillos Campos, a 19-year-old illegal immigrant from El Salvador, appeared in court in Maryland on Thursday for a hearing related to the heinous murder of Carmen Puch. The victim, 42-year-old mother, was stabbed to death. Her body was found doused with gasoline. Apparently, she worked with this human trash, and they had been involved in a romantic relationship. So he stabbed her and set her on fire. Department of Homeland Security, quote, Cedillos Campos is a criminal illegal alien from El Salvador who was arrested by Customs and Border Protection in 2024 after illegally crossing the Biden administration's open border near El Paso, Texas. After his arrest, he was released into the interior of the country, end quote. So he was caught and released 2 years ago, very much like that DE fellow who was allowed to walk out of the detention center under this administration. But this murderer was let free under the Biden administration. He came across the border, he was detained, and they said, oh, no worries, just go on in. And then he proceeded to stab and set a woman on fire. So that's the contrary. That's the counter story that we have to give for all the sob stories that the socialist media likes to proffer out there. But for every one of those stories, we do get some hype. We get some hype maxing. We get some fake news and some fake stats that get tossed out by the Trump administration, which is not doing the mass deportations and not doing the border security that they promised us to do. But unless you read into the details or do a little bit of analysis, crunch a tiny little bit of numbers, you wouldn't know that there's actually more than meets the eye here. There's actually more to the story. I'm talking about this one, which is a report from Fox News. First on Fox, breaking, exclusive. ICE quietly arrests jaw-dropping number of illegal immigrants in massive D.C. area operation. Yeah, they were so quiet, they ran immediately to Fox News and said, run this sob story for us. Run this good PR because you are a great mouthpiece for the administration because there's a Republican in the presidency, and that's what Fox News does when there's a Republican in the White House. Multiple ICE sources told Fox News, because they're being quiet, they had multiple sources, that the ICE arrested 1,328 illegal immigrants over 14 days in the DMV area. DMV would be District of Columbia, Maryland, Virginia, that general vicinity, the DMV. So over a 2-week span, 14 days, ICE arrested 1,328 illegal aliens, which would be 95 per day. That's not anything to write home about, but that's not going to significantly alter or change the demographic situation and the number of illegal aliens that are in that general area. There's a lot of them. And in fact, they didn't even get the worst of the worst, which is what Mark Wayne Mullen loves to talk about, because only 400 of them were, as they're described, criminal illegal aliens. It's the Department of Redundancy Department. It's the ATM machine. They're all illegal. They're all criminals. But these others, these 400, they were allowed to commit extra crimes on top of violating the American government sovereignty by coming across our border without permission. 400. Well, we're always told that Department of Homeland Security is really focusing on the worst of the worst. 60, 70, 80% of those arrests, they got to be the worst of the worst. Well, in this case, it's not. It's 30%. So 3 in 10. So I guess you got a lot of docile day laborers who are going to Home Depot, not really getting the worst of the worst. Now, I'm not going to complain about anybody. They're all illegal aliens. I'm going to complain about the very low number. You're getting them by the dozens each day. And spare me any sort of declaration that Fox News is going to allow that this was jaw dropping or this was kind of quiet. This operation that we only learned about because multiple sources from the Department of Homeland Security came to Fox News and said, we need you to run this story because we got to distract the American people who are interested in mass deportations, who are interested in securing our border with this ridiculous story. And then make sure you throw in 400 of them were really, really bad guys. And we hope that they can't do basic math. Basic division, 400 divided by 1,328, that gets you 30%. Not impressive. All right, off of the illegal alien or loss of immigration in general, but actually we can stay geographically in the same area. Now that DHS operation, the jaw-dropping one that was just reported in Fox, that was in the DMV area, Washington, D.C. There's a problem in Washington, D.C. Well, there's lots of problems in Washington, D.C., but specifically to this story, I want to touch on. There's a jury pool problem. Now, we were initiated to this. We became aware of this really during the Biden administration for all things related to January 6th. Now, typically, for a trial by jury, everybody is trying to get off that jury due. Everybody says whatever they can possible to get out of jury duty. That is the way traditionally things are going. Nobody wants to sit in the courthouse. It's boring. It's long. If you happen to run your own business, it's pulling you away. It's costing you money. I know they pay you like $58, but it sucks. Now, having been in, I think it's 7 or 8 federal criminal trials, I've been through the voir dire, the process where they select the juries about half a dozen times. And it's the same thing at a local level as it is with the federal level. Everybody is desperate. Now, in my situation, it was in Omaha, Nebraska. So that meant that the pool of people was for the entire state of Nebraska. There were people who theoretically got called from 9, 10, 11 hours away, and they had to drive up for jury duty, which is kind of why a lot of people want to get out of it. They don't want to have to stay overnight in a hotel. They certainly don't want to commute back and forth if they happen to live, say, an hour and a half, 2 hours away. Who wants to stay in a hotel when you can just go home at night? But it stinks. That commute back and forth, early morning, late night. Nobody wants to be involved. And I will never forget one of the trials that I was involved in involved domestic violence. Old boy tuning up his old lady. Now, that gets very emotional, and people have a hard time being neutral, being unbiased, not letting their prejudices seep in, because people have different lived experiences, which might affect them differently. If you're the victim of domestic violence, you probably shouldn't be on the jury. If you're the perpetrator or you've been accused of it, you probably shouldn't be on the jury. If somebody in your family has been the victim, who's been really close to you, maybe not. So they're going through, and the judge is asking people, do you have any sort of lived experience which might preclude you from being on this jury? And a couple of them get up. Hey, I've been the victim of domestic violence. I don't think that I can be on this. It was just going to be too emotionally scarred for me. I have a trauma. And the judge was pretty liberal and said, okay, you can go. Okay, you can go. And there was this one guy in the back who was so desperate to get off this jury. And he kept saying, well, I have a third cousin twice removed who made allegations about a boyfriend when she was in college who did things. I mean, really obscure. And then he would keep coming back whenever the judge said, well, do you think you can be neutral in this? And his conscience would get to the best of him. Jiminy Cricket would be whispering on his ear, and he would say, yeah, well, I guess I can. And he tried this like 2 or 3 times. And then finally, another guy decided to hell with it. I don't care what people think about me. I'm never going to see any of them again. I'm going back to my farm. I'm going back to my house, wherever he wanted to go. And he said to the judge, Judge, sometimes I think the women deserve it. So the judge immediately removed him from the jury duty. And it ping pongs back to the first guy who was super honest up until that moment when he saw his opportunity. And he just stands up and he goes, yeah, me too. So good on him. He got off of the jury duty. And I think that was the one that we wound up winning. That's the one I wrote about in my book. It was a pretty good outcome because a dirtbag went to jail for really seriously hurting a woman. So that's the story about the jury duty. But for January 6th in Washington, D.C., they weren't doing that. There were people who were desperate to get on the juries. They wanted to be part of the process. They wanted to put grandmas who walked through the Capitol on January 6, 2021, exercising their First Amendment rights to assemble, to petition, to speak, and walk through a building that is open 24 hours a day to talk to their elected officials. Not talking about the exceptions, the people that were doing violence or vandalism, but the vast majority of people. Those in DC wanted to get on the jury so they could be the executioner and destroy these people's lives. That was borne out for years while the federal government weaponized itself to go after people for what their actions were on January 6th, and mostly they were peaceful. Now, that jury pool still remains. And Jeanine Pirro, the United States Attorney for the District of Columbia, the worst named district in America, she's finding that out the hard way. This is from CNN. Trump admin celebrated the prosecution of accused MS-13 ringleaders. Then the case fell apart twice. Now, the individual here that they highlight, his name is Moises Rivera Luna. He's a man who the DOJ says ordered murders in the United States from inside a Salvadoran jail cell over a decade ago. But over the past year, the case against him has run up against two juries in Washington, D.C. that simply couldn't agree, ending with mistrials for both hung juries. Now, Jeanine Pirro, her office has a jury problem. An increasingly alarming number of cases have fallen apart this year in Washington, D.C., even when the cases appear to be strong arguments against violent crime, straightforward to prove, and they've been tried by experienced prosecutors. Now, the records that have come out here, since this hung jury in April, the U.S. Attorney's Office has had 12 cases. 2 of them were acquitted, not guilty. 4 of them hung juries. That means they're batting 50%. Overall, it is a 50% success rate in prosecutions in Washington, D.C., just about. Largely criminal trials in Washington, D.C. at a federal level, 50% success for the prosecutors. Well, how does that compare to the rest of the country? It's 90+%. 90+% of federal prosecutions of defendants in this country end in a conviction. Guilty on some of the counts, if not all of the counts, because they are so buttoned up. The federal government doesn't go willy-nilly into a case where they don't have the goods already. You're pretty much done, except in Washington, D.C. Now, why would that be? They know they have a violent crime problem in Washington, D.C. This guy was ordering people in Washington, D.C. to get murdered while he was in El Salvador. Did they not take as much umbrage about that as they did with the events at the Capitol on January 6th? No, they didn't, because Washington, D.C. is ceded territory. It is a communist enclave. It is not governable at this point. And they hate the Trump administration so much in that city that they're willing to let gang leaders, murderers, go free. And you know what? They can choke on it. I know that's not pleasant to say, but a actual honest assessment of the problems that exist in Washington, D.C., you can't say we'll just put a bunch of National Guardsmen there and everything will be awesome and better. Nope. If I was the president of the United States and I had billions of dollars and I had my own private compound in southern Florida, I would be there full time. There's no way I would be in Washington, D.C. It's not safe. It doesn't want me there. We need to functionally operate like a different country at this point. There is no rectifying the situation. You can do all you want about cleaning up the reflecting pool and making sure there's no graffiti on the monuments. There's always more than meets the eye. And the people who live in Washington, D.C. utterly detest the president of the United States and his acolytes and his representatives. And that guy, for all intents and purposes, is the candidate who they would have voted for 25 years ago. Donald Trump is further left than Bill Clinton, and Bill Clinton is regaled as a hero of the Republic in Washington, D.C. But that's the persona. Mean, orange, literally Hitler, and we're willing to let rapists, murderers, gangbangers go free just to make a political statement. All right, we got some other stuff I want to get to, guys, in a moment. But before we do, make sure, if you haven't already, do give us a nice like and a thumbs up and follow, subscribe on the YouTube channel and on the Rumble channel. Everything is at AmRadPod. And you can also head on over to the Spotify channel if you happen to miss the live stream, which comes on noontime Eastern every weekday. Spotify picks it up right after that. Normally around 1 o'clock Eastern is when I have the chance to drop the episode in there. And that similarly is under the umbrella of AmRad Pod. You can give that a follow if you want to catch up on an episode you happen to miss, or you want to recommend it to somebody else. I really beseech you, I humbly request that you send them on over to Spotify. Again, AmRad Pod, and I'll schedule the ad to run right about now. Let's talk about a new term, something that just caught my fancy, something I wanted to throw out to the American Radicals podcast audience. It's a new term that has been coined from 404 Media, my favorite left-wing personal privacy anti-tech website at this point. 404media.co reports the following: subtle fakes, slightly altered, non-consensual AI images are taking over X meaning Twitter. And 404 Media doesn't like Twitter because it's owned by Elon Musk, and he purports to be friends with the president. And 404 Media is left-leaning, and they think the president's mean, orange, and literally Hitler. But I do think this is an interesting opinion piece from 404 Media because it introduces the idea of a subtle fake, which the other terms I knew before, and you're probably familiar with, deep fake. It's completely artificial intelligence. They create some sort of a video like Thomas Massey and Ilhan Omar and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez going in for a menage a trois in a hotel. There are people who believe that actually happened. It's a deep fake. It's not real. Totally fake. And a lot of people are primed to believe things because people want to believe things that reinforce the ideas they already have. If you're under the idea that Thomas Massey is an objective force for ill, you want a reason to justify not voting for him in a primary, you're more inclined to believe things. And also, people are kind of dumb. Half of all people are below average intelligence. I remember in the 2008 presidential campaign, Tina Fey, she played Sarah Palin on Saturday Night Live. And you remember she did the "I can see Alaska from my house." I mean, spitting image for Sarah Palin. And I think Sarah Palin went on Saturday Night Live at one point and they did a side by side. It was really well done. It was very funny, it was very effective, and very memorable. There are still people today who think that Sarah Palin, the actual person, said, "I can see Alaska, I can see Russia from my house." It didn't happen. It was an actress on a comedy show on cable television. Deepfakes will work. They will work. Now that's deepfakes. And then we also learned about cheap fakes, which became more well known with the Biden human Roomba administration. And those were things that were videos that were real, but they were taken out of context and presented in a way to make a person look like they were doing something they weren't really doing, or making them look like they were dumb when they weren't really dumb. But those were the allegations about Joe Biden just kind of like wandering off into the wilderness and looking in the wrong direction, and just completely out to lunch. And the Biden administration tried to come in and say, "Oh no, those are just cheap fakes." Really, behind the scenes, he's riding a unicycle and juggling knives and doing backflip dunks. Nobody can keep up with him. And then we all saw what happened at the debate in 2024, and those cheap fakes were probably closer to real than was actually being articulated by the Biden administration. But what are subtle fakes? Now, they go into it here. Much like a cheap fake, which in 2019, Data and Society described as an edited piece of media that manipulated the truth without requiring artificial intelligence or any other advanced technology, subtle fakes are another form of synthetic media that has taken over the internet since 2017. These more convincing images are not AI generated nude photos of celebrities or face swapped identities onto porn videos, but AI generated images of celebrities that are subtly edited to make them more revealing or more provocative. So you can do the deep fake. You can do a completely fictional video of a famous person doing something in the nude and it's not their body. Or you can take the famous person's face and put it on a different body. And that's deep fake stuff. But what these are doing is it's taking somebody on the red carpet and maybe making the cleavage on a female look a little bit bigger or make somebody look a little bit thinner, a little bit fatter, different elements of the body. It sexualizes the people and it's becoming increasingly more prolific on the internet. And it's being used to also engagement farm because you can put out a risque photo of an extremely popular actress or a model or an athlete, and that will get people to click on that so you can monetize it. And these images are not real. They're completely synthetic. They're augmented and there's not a lot of oversight with it because websites will reject deep fakes. Websites have certain measures in there to prevent people from creating a fictional pornographic video of a supermodel or of a politician or of a movie star. You won't be able to do it. But when it relates to just, a little shave here, maybe bring that mini skirt up a couple of inches, a little bit more revealing. Let's enhance certain body parts to levels that are not accurate. The software is not going to stop that from happening. And it's just something to keep in mind, something to keep an eye on, aware of, because as the artificial intelligence wave is just coming into its boom right now, this is going to be one other thing that's attached to it. And there's First Amendment concerns, and there's also just personal privacy matters. So, all of those things, just want to throw it out. New term, subtle fakes. So, you can have it on your radar. And we can talk about a couple more pieces I have actually related to the AI and the big tech stuff. The first one is from Politico, and a little bit of naughty language here, but I won't say it. I'll insert my own censorship here. I will self censor from the Politico. The headline reads, Data centers oh bleep moment. Some industry leaders fear voter backlash is turning into lasting political crisis. This is all about how nobody in America wants data centers. It's in excess of 7 in 10 Americans. I think it's 72% at last count of Americans are opposed to the construction of data centers in their communities, which would mean that 7 in 10 Americans is technically an anti-tech violent extremist and could find themselves in the crosshairs of an FBI domestic terrorist investigation. But to this piece from Politico, some tech industry advocates maintain that the public pushback against data centers is a fleeting storm generated by candidates who are trying to get these wedge issues to get out the vote, but they're not really serious about pushing back on that. But others call that wishful thinking. One result is the growing bipartisan push for a temporary moratorium on data center construction. So there's a couple of candidates for office that get mentioned here, and they are bipartisan. You have Josh Shapiro, currently, he's the governor of Pennsylvania, Democrat, on the short list to run for president in 2028. He has an executive order that requires local communities to approve of the state grant permits for these data center construction. So it can't just come from the state house, from the governor's office. It can't come from the politicians who are there. The local community has a say and says, hey, we don't want the data center. So there's some sort of a speed bump from allowing that to happen. Now, the woman who's running against Josh Shapiro, the Republican, she's the treasurer. She actually has endorsed a temporary moratorium, like no construction for a year. That's even more enhanced. You have Governor Hot Wheels from Texas, Greg Abbott. He has paused approvals for data center construction, and he wants the state house to do some audits or something to that effect. And then you have in Michigan, Mike Rogers, Republican, running for Senate there, and he's endorsed a one-year moratorium as well. Now, outside of the specific candidates, there are actually states that have tried as a whole to take action to push back on data centers. 8 states this year alone enacted legislation rolling back data center subsidies, so tax breaks for their construction, and another 17 states have considered it. That's half the country. That's half the states in the union have at least considered it, and 8 of the states in our country have said, no, we're going to definitely throw up some speed bumps here. So, is this a fleeting thing? Is this just heated political rhetoric? Is this the bleep moment for the data centers? Well, it gets given away here at the political at the end. Where do the tech bros actually fall on this? Is there some naivete? Are they taking everything and saying, hey, yeah, the American people are speaking? We're going to have to edit. We're going to have to pivot. We're going to have to maybe do something that is more in line with what they want so that we can be part of the social compact. Or are they just going to try to steamroll this on through and hope that they have enough politicians who are bought off in positions of authority that they can get exactly what they want? Now, here's the quote from the Politico. Some in the tech industry are beginning to embrace the backlash, telling Politico that this newfound attention, if channeled properly, can help communities and government leaders understand the positive impacts of these data facilities. This is like the apology that's a non apology. I'm sorry that you misunderstood what I was saying. I'm sorry that you felt offended. Not, I'm sorry that I offended you. I'm sorry that I misinformed you. No, they're saying, hey, your righteous concerns about elevated electric bills or water bills or decreased water pressure or maybe that the jobs won't be there or how it's not necessarily fair for the construction site to get a tax subsidy when people who have lived here their entire lives don't get it, when it's not going to create any jobs. Or maybe you're a Gaia worshiper who's worried about the carbon getting released by the data center creating a bigger hole in the ozone layer. Now, those concerns are great, but we're really looking at this as an opportunity to better educate you on how awesome our data centers are, which means that they're just going to steamroll. There's no intention of slowing down at all, despite what Governor Hot Wheels or Governor Shapiro is going to do. Enough of these folks have been bought off. Enough of them will be pressured right after the election to give big tech exactly what it wants. And big tech wants to get into the workspace on the promise that it is going to be the solution. Data centers are going to prop up the artificial intelligence. That is the way that we will grow our way out of $40 trillion of debt. America's going to explode, baby. Mega, MAGA, Doppler, awesome. Everything is more efficient, best practices. Don't worry about a thing. The golden age is upon us. Unless, of course, you go to Fortune magazine and you find out that actually most executives in the professional workplace say that artificial intelligence has not boosted productivity at all. As the frequency of artificial intelligence investments announcements rise, so too do announcements of job cuts. The expectation is that if AI makes employees more efficient, the company will need fewer of them. So you bring in AI to do the things that people were doing in the past. AI works 24 hours a day. It doesn't need to take a bathroom break or need health insurance. So we can get rid of the people. The people are not necessary. They're non essential when you have Hal in charge, right? Managers expect that both AI investment and job cuts will enhance companies' value because you're not having to pay out the health insurance or the 401ks or give people sick times or coffee breaks. AI is here. We can just fire these people because their jobs can be taken on by the ones and the zeros, which would mean that the companies who are employing artificial intelligence rather than people should be more valuable. They're going to be more efficient. They can work 24 hours a day. They don't have the outflow. Payroll expenses are the number one expense for most businesses. Makes sense. That would make the company more valuable to invest in. We don't have the overhead. We've done the investments in the AI. It can do all the things that we need done. We don't have to worry about a person being out sick or whose kid has some sort of an early afternoon activity. Now he's got to take off a couple hours early. All of that is no longer a consideration. We can use the AI. So aren't we a more valuable company? Well, the analysis that went on in Fortune found out that that has not been what's happened. The examination of stock market to the layoff announcement saying, hey, we're going to fire people and use AI, the average return was almost zero. It didn't make the companies more valuable. Well, how's that possible? I just explained how it would be a superior way to go about achieving the mission of creating a process to make or fabricate a good or a service that people, the customers want, need, and desire, and are willing to part with their hard-earned money to obtain. Makes sense, right? Except that what Fortune found was that one of the biggest of the hidden costs that's associated with laying off people and using AI instead is that it makes employees who get to remain at the company, the ones who aren't laid off, who aren't fired, not reduction enforced, rift, it makes them more fearful. They're caught in a trap because they're being told you have to use AI because we need it to be really efficient. But the more they use it, they know that they make themselves non-essential. So they kind of sabotage the entire process and don't use it in an efficient way. So it winds up being kind of a wash across the board. The AI is there, the potential is there to be more efficient, but the human component looks around and says, I need my job. I will sabotage the efficiency in this operation to ensure that I don't get laid off like my neighbor just did in the cubicle next to me. The sabotage, like a judge who comes in and says that these 75 countries, they get to come here all they want and make sure that they can suck up our resources. The same sort of mentality exists. Ultimately, self-serving nature of humanity is undefeated. That judge wants all of those third world hellions to come into our country and suck up the resources and get to a point where the system is overwhelmed and we have to just throw our hands up and allow them to be here forever and we can have a communist utopia in the eyes of a Biden appointed judge. The employees that work for these companies are saying, I need my job. I got a mortgage. I got kids. I got tuition. I got to feed myself, whatever the expense is. I need this job. I need to work in this industry, and this industry is starting to cut jobs. They're starting to lay off my coworkers. What can I do when I'm being pressured to use this tool, which in essence is designed to take my job away from me? Well, I can sabotage it the best I can to make it less efficient for us. And the companies are not having the outgrowth and having the output that is necessary to justify the job cuts. The human component is absolutely necessary. The last thing is, in effect, many employees are resisting AI because they have watched their colleagues lose jobs to it or fear they will be next. Now, one more story I want to get to is on the subject of losing jobs. And this is off of the artificial intelligence. This is more pertaining to the gender wars. And this was a story that rolled out of the Wall Street Journal with an accompanying video. So we'll give this a play and then talk about how men are disappearing from the office.
Where did all the guys in the office go?
American women now hold 176,000 more payroll jobs than American men. That's a far cry from 3 decades ago when men held nearly 7 million more jobs than women. What changed? The largely male-dominated industries of manufacturing and construction have lost employment for decades due to automation and offshoring. Meanwhile, the healthcare industry, which is 78% female, is thriving. The male unemployment rate is actually relatively low right now, but the number of men who aren't even looking for a job has reached a nearly 20-year high. Gen Z men grew up witnessing the effects of the Great Recession and corporate America's push to bring more women into male-dominated fields. That left many of them feeling pessimistic about their own employment prospects. So for the guys who aren't working or even looking for work, what are they up to? Many are living at home. Some are even embracing the trend of being a stay-at-home boyfriend with a breadwinning girlfriend. This is all while more and more of life is happening through a screen. Social media, video gaming, sports betting, further isolating men from real life. But we can fix this. We can encourage more men to enter education, healthcare, and administration, just as women were encouraged to pursue careers in STEM. We could also expand vocational training and apprenticeships for men who are skipping college. It's time to bring a generation of young men back in from the sidelines.
So, problem with the messenger there. I don't know if I really like having the very young, inexperienced female talk about how she's got the solutions for men in the workplace. But the numbers that she threw out there, and there's an accompanying article from Wall Street Journal, are accurate. It appears that American women now hold a 176,000 jobs lead over men overall in our economy in this country. More jobs for women, 176,000 more jobs are female than male. All the US job growth since last July, 13 months, has been females. 1 million fewer men were in college in 2023 than 2011. Women have also gotten more bachelor's degrees than men in each of the last 30 years. Non-college men's earning has fallen by 30% compared with the prime age workers since 1980. So we have a permanently shifted workplace. And a lot of it is because of where we put our focus. There was more than met the eye when we were told that we need to get all the girls into STEM, that we need to really focus on bringing the girls into the workplace. well, there were only a certain number of jobs that necessitated cutting opportunities for other people based on immutable characteristics like what they got dangling between their legs. I don't know why this push was there at all. Shouldn't the push have always been to let's make sure that we have the best people in an area and not really concern ourselves with their chromosomes, content of character? Like, as long as we're going to say things that are wildly offensive today, like laughing at a person who says that they're on their way to go get their brain tumor handled, what about a study on the efficiency, like they did with the AI, the use of AI and cutting off jobs and using HAL and the ones and zeros? Said, what about a study about efficiency in the workplace now that it's dominated by women? Is it more efficient? Is it superior? Is it better? Because if it's not, then I think we have to be honest about that and say, well, maybe we should push boys back into STEM. I don't know what the numbers are. Is anybody willing to take that up, or is everybody going to be concerned that the outcome of that study, the results, the answers that we get might be a little bit offensive? I don't care what's offensive. I don't care if it offends your sensibilities for me to say, send all the illegal aliens down to the Rio Grande like in a trail of tears. And I don't care if they have unsanitary conditions when they're being detained. I'm interested in outcomes. I'm interested in getting the best bang for my buck. Are we getting that right now? Or are we just still doing the DEI thing? Are we still trying to do things and say things that make people feel good rather than get to the real truth? And the truth can make you miserable, but at least you know what the actual results are. All right, guys, that's the end of the program for today. But I'm not going to leave you without a nice biblical worldview, which I got from Proverbs chapter 13, verse 24. Whoever spares the rod hates his son, but he who loves him is diligent to discipline him. There's more than meets the eye because you feel bad having to actually instill discipline in the kiddos. But you're giving them the gift of discipline, something that they will take with them forever, which is kind of what I do here, where I say things that are wildly offensive and I laugh sometimes, but what's true is true. I was telling my wife when we were driving back from getting ripped off at the cupcake station, I have this gift and a curse. I think I get part of it from each of my parents. I think my mom is a very like rationally minded, doesn't get overheated, and she's commonsensical about the way she approaches things. And my dad tends to just say things and doesn't care if it offends you if he believes it's true. I got both of them. I will say things that will be wildly offensive, and then I'll present the receipts. Because I've been saving them. So you tend to hate me more, not because I offend you, but because I brought the evidence to back it up. So that's what I love to do here on this program. The sob stories about the illegal aliens are complete trash, and I will laugh and laugh and laugh at them because they're farcical and they're designed for one thing and one thing only, and that is to make you feel bad so we can have 100 million illegal aliens in this country continue to suck up the resources that we cannot afford to give them. The ICE arrests being jaw-dropping and quietly done, they're not that impressive. And they can tout them all they want. They have not met the burden the American people require as far as doing the mass deportations that we need. Less than 100 a day. That's ridiculous. That's by the dozens. We need to add on a couple of zeros to get anywhere close to what we voted for in November of 2024. Data centers, the oblique moment, it's not. They're just going to continue to roll. They believe that they have enough of these politicians purchased, that it doesn't matter how many angry town halls that we have to witness on social media over the next couple of years. They are inevitable from their perspective. There has to be pain at the ballot box. That's the only way out of this. And then also, AI isn't boosting productivity because humanity is still integral. We cannot automate everything forever. We're people. We have feelings, we have fears, we have emotions, we have sensitivities. We're not automatons. Despite what the best efforts are of any sort of corporation to reach maximum efficiency levels, there's always going to be a human component and the human proclivity to do what's in our own best interest. And that should be factored in when any sort of evaluation goes on about what is going to be best for an organization or for a culture or for society in general. All right, guys, that is the end of the program for today. And thank you as always for joining us. And we'll be planned to back with you tomorrow, noontime Eastern here on YouTube and Rumble at AmRadPod. And until then, have a great day.
been listening to the American Radicals podcast. Find us on YouTube, Rumble, and X at AmRadPod.